How is this something that we explain? Well, firstly, we need to go back and talk about what nushuz is. What does high-handedness mean? And this is something that's very important. Basically, high-handedness or nushuz is open disrespect. High-handedness is when it reaches a level, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He uses the same term for both women against men, and then later on in the same surah, He uses it for men against women. So when there's complete and total disrespect between the spouses, then an individual, these are some of the steps that he needs to take in order to reconcile between these two individuals. The first one being that he starts with women. And this is something that's very significant, because later on in the surah he talks about men. You know, if a woman fears nushuz from her husband. So why did Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala start with women? Because women are more disrespectful by nature.
More troublemakers.
They're more troublemakers? Statistically in the United States, you guys have any idea, like, I know that, for not the divorce rate in and of itself, but the ones who initiate divorce, do you guys have any idea what percentage that is? It's 70%. 70% of the women, like, of divorce, out of those, 70% of the cases are initiated by women. And this really puts a light into, like, it really puts a context to why is it that Islam is predominantly, in Islam, divorce is predominantly in the hand of the woman. A woman can get out of the marriage, and it's not difficult for her to get out of a marriage situation. But in general, the hand, or the power of the divorce lies in the hand of the man. And Wallahu A'lam, this seems to be one of the hikam, or one of the wisdoms behind that. And the first step, so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says, remind them of the teaching of Allah. And this is the initial spiritual reminder to them. Like, listen, you know, please, you should fear Allah. This is not how you should deal with your husband. And He should give her a verbal reminder. After that, He should ignore them when they go to bed. And after a spiritual chastisement, that, you know, which is the first step, the second one is the actual physical one. This doesn't mean to sleep in another room, you know, to go sleep on the couch. No, it just means you're not intimate with them. And those of us who are married, we know that you can be sleeping next to a person and you can be completely cold. And it's not something that is totally strange, and it's something that is definitely understandable. But there's no need to leave the house. You can't say, oh, you know, I'm reconciling by leaving the house. That's not going to bring reconciliation. But if she knows that you're upset, if she knows that you're angry, this is one of the psychological tools that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us to use. The third step is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, and then hit them. This is different from abuse, and we'll talk a little bit more about this, because this deserves a complete talk and a complete discussion in and of itself. And then the fourth step is divorce. The fourth step is choosing arbitrators between people, and this is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He talks about this in another ayah. And then the final step, if the arbitrators don't work, this is where divorce comes in. And there are different ways to invoke and start a divorce, but we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to preserve the marriages that are there, and to allow them to have arbitration and come together upon khair. Ameen. So there was actually a story of divorce of Thabit ibn Qais, where he came to the Prophet ﷺ and he said, "O Messenger of Allah, I do not blame," the wife of Thabit, she came to the Messenger of Allah and said, "O Messenger of Allah, I do not blame Thabit for defects in his character or his religion, but I, being a Muslim, dislike to behave in an un-Islamic manner," meaning that she was disrespecting him. On that which Allah's Messenger ﷺ said to her, "Will you give back the garden which your husband gave to you as mahar?" She said, "Yes." And the Prophet ﷺ said to Thabit, "O Thabit, accept your garden and divorce your wife." So this is definitely one of those cases where the marriage didn't work out, and she asked to be removed from it, and the Prophet ﷺ allowed that. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He also talks about later on in the same surah, about the nushuz of the man, and how a woman, she doesn't take the same steps. She's not going to follow the same steps that the husband follows toward her. And again, that's because of the relationship between them, and because of the nature of marriage and the position of the man, the role of the man, the role of the woman in the marriage. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, for her, she needs to go to arbitration immediately. That's the first step that she would take if she wants to deal with any type of disrespect. If she feels her husband is completely disrespecting her, she's not going to take those same steps. She's actually going to go immediately to arbitration. So the hitting. How is this something that we put in context? How is this something that we deal with? Firstly, and the most important thing that I need to point out, and something that we all need to understand, there's a difference between hitting and abuse. That's something that needs to be very, very clear. If a woman is being bruised, if a woman is being battered, this is no excuse. This is not hitting. This is abuse. This is blowing. This is clear and straight oppression, and she has full rights and full grounds for a marriage. That the man needs to have an order, like a restraining order placed on him, and he needs to be distanced from that woman, because this is completely impermissible. This is not allowed, and he cannot use the excuse that I'm trying to teach her a lesson. This is completely incorrect, and this is a completely wrong understanding. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, they allowed us to hit in another situation also. Hit, not actually killing us, right? Yes? No one knows? Our children. Are we allowed to hit our children?
Yes.
Yes, we are. And even, and a lot of people, they don't know this, but even in the state of New Jersey and in the majority of the United States, spanking is legal. Spanking your child is legal. Where does it become an issue though? When you go to the court. When you go to the court, they don't say that he was spanking his child. They say he was what? Abusing his child. So there's a very fine line between spanking and abuse. And please, nobody go home and be like, yes, finally, I've been waiting for this chance. Now, while spanking is something that is legal and it is allowed, we have to understand that within the court system here, there is a very fine line between spanking and abuse. So even though we might have been disciplining and spanking our children, it will be raised to an abuse case and it will become an issue. So please, be very careful with that. And the other situation is this one, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He talks about hitting. So in Nigeria, they actually did a study. This was done, I think, in like 2004 or something. But there was a study that was done in Nigeria where they surveyed women. They surveyed all kinds of women. They surveyed Muslims, Christians, and those who were from the local tribes and who had the local religions. So 70% of Muslim women considered it acceptable for a husband to hit his wife under certain circumstances. 52% of Christian women said it was okay. And 64% of women adhering to other African religions also thought it was fine. And there's a reason that I'm bringing this statistic, inshallah, and I'll get to the point. The other thing is, did Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam ever strike any of his wives or ever hit any of his wives? No, we don't have a single narration concerning that. Even Aisha radiallahu anha, she said that the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam did not strike a servant or a woman, and he never struck anything with his hand. Very clear hadith from one of his wives. Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam himself said, if you must, then do so without leaving a mark. The only place we find the religious text that talks about hitting our wives is this ayah. That's it. This is the only place we find it. We don't find it anywhere else in the Quran. And again, if it gets to the point of abuse, it will be taken to court. And historically, I'm talking from the time of the Prophet ﷺ until today, there are many abuse cases that have been taken to judges, and the judge ruled in favor of the wife. And I'll bring some modern cases, inshallah, I'll bring to light. But even during the Khilafas, the Umayyads and the Abbasis, it didn't happen too often, but when it did, the wife won the case. It happened during the Turkish Empire, during the Ottomans. There are many cases where a woman would come forward and say, my husband abused me, he hit me, and he did all this, and the judge would rule in her favor. So even historically, women had support when it came to the issue of abuse. This is not something that happened, the Me Too movement isn't freeing anyone. So we need to understand that this verse is something that was meant to be taken throughout time. It was meant to come until Yawm al-Qiyamah. It was meant to apply to every single culture. And not just that, and a very serious question, are there individuals who will not use any of these methods for reconciliation? Are there individuals who will bypass all of these and go straight to divorce? Right? There are people who say, no, I don't want to talk to her. I don't care about sleep. I don't care about arbitration. I don't care about any of these things. I don't want to be with her anymore. I want a divorce. And the same thing the other way around, right? The woman will be like, I just want out of this marriage. I don't want anything to do with this guy. And they'll bypass all of these steps. The second thing we need to understand, we need to put this in context. All of these steps are for what? What is the goal of these steps? Reconciliation. If at any point, any of these steps are harming that reconciliation, regardless, forget the hitting, even any of them. if I choose an arbitrator and I make my arbitrator my brother, and my wife hates my brother, for example, my wife absolutely abhors, and she hates my brother, and I choose him to arbitrate on my behalf, am I trying to reconcile that marriage? Is that a recommended way for me to do that? No, absolutely not. Because if my wife finds out that he sent his brother, he knows I can't stand it. This is not going to lead to the reconciliation, which is the goal of all of these steps. So if I hit her and I strike her, and you live in a culture where that's looked down on, what are the chances that the marriage will come back together? 100%. No, the marriage won't work. If it's something that she culturally looks down on. Because these steps, again, the Prophet ﷺ, he never used them. There were times where he fought with his wives. There were times where he disagreed with them. He even vowed to stay away from all of them. He was just so fed up, he stayed away from all of them for 1 month. And he vowed this. He said, I'm going to stay away from all of you for 1 month, because he was just so upset with them. So this issue, or this fighting between spouses, and this friction between spouses, is something that's historical, and not just historical, it's something that's been happening from the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ himself until this time today. It's nothing new. But we need to understand that these steps that we take, they have to be ones that actually lead to reconciliation. And if taking any one of these particular steps will not lead to that, then you cannot use that step. Very simple. Regardless of what it is. So if, for example, I say to my wife, listen, we need to fear Allah and this and that, and she doesn't want to hear the spiritual chastisement. She doesn't want to hear me preaching at her because of my position or because of the history or whatever. That is not a step I should use. If I'm not intimate with her and that just makes the situation worse, I am not leading to any reconciliation. And I cannot use that step. And the same thing applies to hitting, the same thing applies to arbitration. We need to understand that these steps are there, and they are not an obligation. These are recommended steps. That's another point. These are recommended steps from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because you do not find throughout Islamic history every companion who got divorced, did they follow step 1, 2, 3, 4, 5? No, it didn't happen like that. Some of them took one step, some of them might have jumped a step, some of them didn't take any steps. It really depends. There are different situations, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He presents these as options for us to take, not obligations for us to follow. So I hope, inshallah, that puts a little context into that, because there are cultures that do allow it, there are cultures that will encourage it, and there are cultures that will discourage it. And we need to look at where we are in time, we need to look at where we are in terms of our place, and we need to see, will this actually lead to reconciliation of the marriage or not? And here in the United States, in general, it won't. In general, it won't. She will only resent it. And if there is any type of government involvement, whether it be from the police or otherwise, it's not going to look good. And there's a very good chance that the family will stay separated forever. So it's very important that we put these things in context, that Islam spoke about this because Islam is a universal religion. It is not the religion just for the United States, or it is not a religion just for Nigeria, in the example that we gave, or it is not just a religion for Saudi Arabia. It is a religion that is meant to apply to all of the world. And that's why you have certain obligations, which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made universal, and there are certain things that He's made recommended. If you do them, it's good. If you don't, that's fine. And that's where it applies here. And I just wanted to close with one legal consequence. In 2002, a woman in Saudi Arabia, she came before a judge. She had bruises on her back, her arms, her thighs, and she had a black eye also. So the husband, he claimed, he said, I was disciplining her. I was teaching her a lesson. So, and he cursed her publicly. Like, he took her outside, he was beating her, and he was hitting her, and he was yelling at her, and cursing her publicly. So the judge ruled that he compensate her with 9,000 riyal for the medical expenses, and he ruled that he be lashed 30 times. So this is recent history. This is not even that long ago. So if you have countries or you have judges that will rule by these laws, in general, alhamdulillah, still until today, you will find that they will be in support against these abuse cases and against abuse in general. And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to preserve and to protect us and to protect our marriages and to allow us to fulfill them and to utilize our spouses and allow our spouses to utilize us in our betterment and getting closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Wa qulu qawli hadha wa astaghfirullah li wa lakum wa lisa'il muslimin min kulli dhanbin wa khati'ah innahu huwal ghafurur rahim. Yes?
Are there any other interpretations about this, like that what rib literally means physical hitting, or
There are some people who tried to take it away from the literal meaning into a metaphorical meaning, but it becomes very problematic. It becomes very problematic because you change a lot of the different meanings of different ayat. So it's very difficult to apply that. There is another modern interpretation that I have come across. If you look at the context of the ayah, in the beginning it was talking about women preserving themselves, preserving their chastity for their husbands, right? This is the context of the ayah. So some modern day scholars have said, okay, because the context of the ayah is talking about preserving a woman's chastity, if she cheats on you and you catch her cheating on you, the most you can do is hit her. Does that make sense? Basically, because normally if you found your wife cheating on you, you'd want to kill her. So in order to restrain, it's a way of restraining him and saying that, okay, you're not allowed to do that. And there are some scholars I've heard that from. I personally disagree. I think it's a little far-fetched because it applies to men too. But the avenues for men in taking a second wife, and the avenues for him are a lot more. So it's very difficult for me to apply that and to say that nushuz means cheating.